Good morning, Alex. Welcome to the meeting podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, good morning or good afternoon for you.
Yeah,
Yes.
good afternoon here in Australia, but obviously the day's just started for you in Berlin.
It is. It started with a good cup of coffee. And now it continues with a good conversation.
I think we will, And so tell me, how's the week been treating you?
Pretty well, I must say. Especially this week, our new nanny has started. And it means that right now, the week, obviously, for the kids, it's a little bit of a change because suddenly there's a new person who
Mm,
they have to deal with. But that allows both my wife and I, who both work full time, to spend a little bit more dedicated time on work and then on family. And it's not just balancing both at the same time. So that is a relief for both of
mm,
us. And relief is always good throughout the week, right?
it is. And if you could pinpoint what was the sole catalyst that made you guys go, you know what, we need a natty? Was there one thing, or was it more of a collection of things that go, you know what, we need this?
Interesting question. So look, we so my, my wife and I, we both work full time, and we love our jobs because it's something to do. We enjoy it, and so when we had our first kid, who's 3.5 now, and we got off parental leave, which in Germany is pretty nice, and we can talk about it later. And we got off parental leave and we are like, okay, good. We both have, full-time jobs. How will we manage that um, throughout the week? And we said, look, let's try and get a nanny because we didn't want to put our then 8-month-old son directly into kindergarten or something like this. And we thought,
Mm,
we have the opportunity, so let's try it. And it worked out pretty well because it's basically help at home. We can focus for 7-8 hours, maybe 6 throughout the day, and then you come back and you have your mind free for family, and that's when it worked out well for the first part. And we went on parental leave again for our second kid.
mm.
She is 1 year now. And then we got back from parental leave and said, let's do it again. We had a little bit of a trouble finding a nanny for kind of the second attempt, because ultimately you don't want to give to just anyone who comes around, right?
Mm,
And it's probably been the hardest interview process
it
and
would be, eh?
decision-making process of whom to hire that I've ever had. And I had hired a lot of people throughout my career, but here you're like, okay, it's your kids, right? Like, there is a
You got to get it
checklist that
right.
this person has to go through. He got to get it right. So
Yeah.
yeah, and hopefully we got it right.
Wow. And I was actually going to ask you, how do you even critique, a nanny? I know knowing you from, the time we both worked together at Freshworks, I'm pretty sure you're the type of guy who maybe has some sort of, checklist on an Excel, and you might grade it in terms of different characters or sort of categories, right? What was the sort of the top three criteria in terms of making you lean towards a certain nanny?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and yeah, you're right. So my wife and I, we both sat down, and that was early on, right? Our
Mm,
our son was 2 weeks old, and I remember we're driving in the car in Sydney, and I'm like, okay, so he's 2 weeks old. So what do we want him to be like? And you're fresh parents, and you're like, okay, and you're fresh parents, and it's your first kid. I think it changes completely when you have your second kid or your third kid. But with the first, you're like, okay, now we have to, everything. Let's figure it out. Um, and back then, I'm raising this because back then we had a conversation around just values, right? What do you want to be, and what do we want to be as parents? What do we want to strive? And it's not a huge list, but there are 3-4 points um, to drive creativity and curiosity, and drive just not being afraid of doing things, and not putting in boundaries from the very beginning. I think as parents and as grown-ups, we're so good at just, that's not possible, that's not how you do it, that's not an XYZ, right? Especially when, because that's not a boat that you're building there with Lego that has
It
four
has to
wheels.
be,
That's
it has to be four-wheel, it has to have two sides, like we sort of get
yeah,
preconditioned.
yeah.
Mm.
And we say we don't want to do it. Let's try to avoid it. Obviously, it doesn't work all the time. But these are kind of some of the values that we thought we're looking for in a nanny. And then obviously there's things like just be an open-minded person, just be an active person instead of a reactive person. So be creative with the kid. And I know it changes. If the kid is, if child is 7 months, you play differently than when it's 1.5. Play differently than when it's 3.
Mm.
But ultimately, these were some of the things we're looking for. And I kid you not, I probably had 40 throughout the last 3 years, 40 or 50 interviews. And after 20, you get in a groove. And you understand, what is with language, with intonation, with the words they use and the way they answer some of the questions, that obviously only come with experience. And it's also that you only experience when you're a parent for some time. And
Mm.
so after a good amount of time, we think we've found one where it's a very friendly, smiling young lady who's been doing it for a lot of time, a long time, very creative, comes up with a lot of ideas, and you can feel, and I think that's the most important thing, right? There, you can have the interview conversation with that person via phone, but you only, ultimately for us, it was our kids deciding whether it is the right person. So we would invite the nanny to our place for half an hour. And if they click right away, right? And it's like, daddy is still there. Oh, okay, good. Well, whatever. I have my new friend here. Then it's a good sign. And we had occasions where they didn't click,
Mm.
where it was just a very weird, and then he tried and tried, and our son was just like, no, not with
And
you.
you probably ask your son, so son, what was your criteria? And he probably goes, she smiled at me.
Yeah, yeah. It is sometimes this. Yeah, smile, openness, just sometimes on on just going down on the same eye level, right? And treating the child as a person, as an equal person. And how my son likes to call it one-on-one time, where he wants to, he likes one-on-one time. And
Mm.
if somebody can give him one-on-one time, then he will very much take it and enjoy it. And I think that was one of the reasons
I
why it clicked
remember,
this time. So let's see.
yeah, I remember a good trait is that when an adult is speaking with a child, the adult is obviously considerable height, the kid's pretty small, right? The best way to rapport, from what I read, is that the adult basically kneels down and goes eye to eye with the kid, therefore making it sort of
Yeah,
equal. And that was
yeah,
probably one of the big sort of determinants of whether a nanny or a caregiver actually knew what they're talking about, just from what I read.
yeah, yeah. No, it is exactly these little things to um uh same eye level. And it's so amazing. Like, I could talk hours about kids, but it's so amazing how you know basic things like um you know uh answering silly questions with patience allows you to build a totally different relationship with kids, right?
Hmm.
How often do we see parents, and it's us included,
Yep.
kid is, why dad, why is that daddy? And then the parent goes like, because blah blah blah, I told you 1,000 times. Like, well, the kid is not asking, children are not asking because they want to be a nag,
That's
because they're
true.
honestly curious. And it's such a beautiful trait to have. And I think reacting to this in the patience, because it's not out of bad will that a kid is children asking questions. It's because they really want to know and they really want to understand, and it's all new for them. And it's for us that it's all clear why the rain is falling down from the clouds. Well, if you haven't had that in physics in your ninth grade, you probably don't know. So teach your kids. And then you can build those really tight relationships. And I think it's a long-term investment, and patience, bringing the patience with, and explaining things, and reminding yourselves that you've been a kid yourself once, and probably asked exactly the same question, to just be with them and sometimes see the world in their eyes and from their perspective. And in order to see it from their perspective, sometimes you need to kneel down.